Coming up on our Finding Better podcast, we're going to talk about something that lots and lots of people have asked me for advice on, and that is career advice. How do you manage a career? How do you manage work given all the changes, all the layoffs, everything that's happening in the world? What's driving it? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the advice that I've given to my own kids because, and full transparency, I've given them lots and lots of advice. They haven't taken all of it, but I'm going to talk about the advice that they have taken. My job is not to live their life. My job is not to live yours. But to the extent that I might be able to provide some guideposts, they are now living spectacular lives. They're still working, they're still doing their thing, but it is amazing. And I'm going to share all that with you. So sit tight, stay tuned. Thanks for joining me. Share this. Here we go. Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and this is where we share real life experiences of people who have been there and done that and finding better in their own lives. Because you know what? Sometimes a really great strategy to be successful is to copy what's already been done, right? And we don't share opinions, we don't share academics, we don't share theories. It's all about real life experiences. Now, today is a little bit special for me. Uh, this is another session where you're only listening to me because I'm going to talk with you about something that a lot of people have come to me for advice on, and that is work and career. Okay. What do we do in the world that we live in right now with regards to career strategies and work strategies? Because, let's face it, we are facing tough times. It's always tough times. There's never a time when it's not tough times. Okay. I get that. I've lived through 50 years of tough times, but this is unique. We're dealing with a changing world right now. And, there's so many things going on. I mean, you're seeing more and more layoffs happening, more and more people losing their jobs, more and more job insecurity. You're seeing the rise of artificial intelligence. You're seeing lots and lots of, and not too many years ago, there were more great tech jobs out there than there were people to take them. And people were bouncing around from job to job. And I'm here to tell you that ain't the case anymore. Okay. And those of you who are in tech, are feeling it right now. You're feeling the stress. You're feeling what's going on out there. You're feeling the change. And there's a lot of uncertainty these days for the future. I won't get into politics. I won't get into all that stuff. But there's a lot of uncertainty. And in addition to the politics that are causing that uncertainty, it's where the world is going, being driven by exponentially growing technology and artificial intelligence. And so what I want to do with you today is I just want to share with you what I share with my kids and what I teach my kids. And full transparency, I've given my kids lots and lots of advice. Now, the fact of the matter is they've chosen not to take lots and lots of my advice, right? And so I'm not going to go into all the advice that I've given them, but I am going to go into the stuff that they took, the advice that they took, because they are living amazing lives right now. And I'm not saying it's because of me, but you know what? I will say that I provided some of the guideposts that they decided to pay attention to. And so, so what I want to do first is take you through a little bit of history, not that much, but relevant history so you can know what has happened and how we got to where we are today. Because when you see those trends and you see what's happened, you might be able to take those trends and interpret those trends in a way that makes sense to you. Okay. So I started my career, my professional career in 1984 with a company called IBM. Now, IBM at the time was the number one company in the world to work for. I won't get into the details on how I got the job and the things that I did. That's for another day. But what I do want you to know is that back in the mid 80s, people like me chose companies based on the idea that I was going to stay with that company for 30 to 35 years and draw a pension, right? That's a word that a lot of people haven't heard, a lot of young people especially. What's a pension? Okay? But that's what it was. You worked for 30 to 35 years and you got the silver watch, you got the pat on the back, and you got your retirement papers, and they paid you a certain amount every month for the rest of your life. Now, fast forward 10 years to the mid 90s. So, one year on my 10th year working for IBM, they announced six reductions in the pension retirement program in one year. Now, why that's relevant is because our retirement benefits didn't were not fully vested until the day we retired. So if there were 50 additional reductions in our retirement on between that point and the day I retired, I was going to get the retirement program with 50 reductions to it. Okay, does that make sense? And so my wife and I got together and we said, you know what, we got another 20 to 25 years to go. And the chances are that the retirement that we're banking on today isn't going to be there 20 to 25 years from now. And so we made the unconventional decision at the time to leave IBM and to set out on our own to make a go of it and build our own pension slash retirement. Now, that was a really risky proposition in those days. And a lot of people, especially in IBM, asked me, John, how can you risk leaving IBM? You've got two small kids, you've got a mortgage, you've got responsibilities. How can you risk leaving IBM? And my answer to them was, I can't risk staying with IBM. And so we were in Hawaii at that time. We decided to leave Hawaii unemployed and we moved to Seattle because that's where we wanted to raise our family and that's where we thought a lot of opportunity was. So we made some pretty big decisions. And so if you look at the timeline, we went in the 1990s from 30 to 35 year planning horizons in our careers with one company to the 1990s where it was like maybe 10 years, maybe look for a company that you can stay with in 10 years for 10 years. And then the 2000s hit. And from 2000 to about 2020, it went to 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years. And then the 2020s hit and the gig economy kicked in, right? And nowadays, I tell my kids, don't count on anything. Don't count on anything. Now, that puts a big burden of uncertainty on them, on you, right? And you look around, just a few short years ago, there were more tech jobs out there than there were people to take them. And, so people would bounce between technology companies and jobs and increase their salaries and increase their positions with each jump. Nowadays, ain't happening. I can tell you as a fact that that AI is affecting STEM jobs as much as any other profession out there. Now, what is STEM? STEM is sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? Everybody was in STEM. These days, it's gotten much, much tougher. Again, because of the rise of AI. AI is enabling people to become far more productive. You can build websites. AI can build a website for you. I mean, just about anything. And there isn't a what I call a brain job in this world that isn't being affected by AI. Even medical jobs, cancer jobs, attorneys, salespeople, administrative, customer support, everything is being enhanced by artificial intelligence. And so this is an aspect of the world that we live in today that was never there before. That was never there before. Of course, I know I started my technology career before monitors. in the days of punch cards. And you go, what? Okay, try this. Pre-fax machines. Okay. I've been around for a long, long time. And so technology, I mean, you think about your iPhone or your smartphone. I mean, there have been revolutions after revolutions after revolutions. Okay. The PC was a huge revolution. The internet was a gigantic revolution. The smartphone was a gigantic revolution. E-commerce was and on and on and on, right? But what we're seeing today with artificial intelligence is different than anything else. And there's one main reason why. For the first time, artificial intelligence is learning from artificial intelligence. Technology is learning from technology. There are things that AI is doing that the people who built it had no idea it could do. So, this is a crazy world that we're living in. And so, the whole idea is to think about this question. Given that backdrop of where we are today, what can I do? Do I hang up my spurs and do I just give up? Here's the answer. And here's the answer that I've given to my kids. And here's the answer that they have taken to heart and have kicked ass with. You ready? Here's the answer. Find a way to become scrappy and flexible. Okay? Being being scrappy and flexible. Write those two words down. Okay? Now, scrappy means figuring it out. Scrappy means looking at your environment and going, you know what? I ain't going to give up on this. I'm not going to give up my life. I'm going to figure this thing out and do something. You know, in this gig economy, there are more opportunities surrounding us than any time in my lifetime, right? You could work from home. You don't even have to go into an office. You could start a business without buying a building. I mean, for crying out loud. So being scrappy, learning, being flexible, and knowing, and check this out. Let me back up a second. One thing I didn't say is that you're going to like what I have to offer. Okay. But what I'm sharing with you is sincere and totally from my heart. Okay. Get comfortable with the idea of a single profession lasting forever. That idea of a single profession lasting forever is being challenged. And it's going to be challenged more and more all the time. Again, because of the advent and the rise of artificial intelligence. Okay. Now, the way that you keep yourself relevant, the way that being scrappy and flexible should lead to you being constantly relevant. And the way that you maintain relevance is through your own education. I've said this before and I'll say it 1,000 times again. Warren Buffett, one of my favorite quotes from Warren Buffett is that the greatest investment you can make is in your own education. And the opportunities to get educated and learn are massive. There are more learning opportunities today, right here, than any time in human history. There it is. You just have to take the ball. And that's what I want to encourage you to do because it's your relevance. And today's relevance, like I said, with STEM, right? That was relevance 5 or 10 years ago for a couple of decades, right? That relevance sort of kind of went away a little bit, right? And so now they're having to reinvent themselves in learning different things and investing in their own education to find ways to stand out and build relevance and value. Does that make sense? In yourself. Now, I want to give you two examples of my kids, okay? Two totally different strategies that have worked out for them spectacularly. Okay. Example number one, my son decided that he wanted to be in tech. He was going to follow his mom and dad in his mom and dad's footsteps. And out of college, he got a job at Amazon. And fast forward 13 years later, 13 years at Amazon, okay, he wasn't happy anymore. And so we sat back and we said, okay, what are you going to do? He says, well, I'm going to look for another tech job. I said, this is only a couple months ago now. I said, really? You are going to fight the tide? Because there are not very many good jobs out there. Not at his level. And so he says, yeah, Dad. He says, I'm going to look for another tech job with a better company. I said, with a better company. I said, okay, great. And so I said, so what's your strategy? He goes, Dad, one thing that I got from you and Mom is I can outwork anybody. That's his gift, is that he's not only smart, he's a smart guy, but he's got the gift of working and working hard. And he says, that's how I stand out. He says, I can keep up with everybody in my circle. He says, but they can't keep up with me. And that's what's going to rule my strategy, and that's what's going to get me over the finish line. So fast forwarding to the result, he joined Netflix 2 weeks ago, and great company, by his own measure, better than Amazon, and he leveled up. He leveled up. Now, his strategy was one where he's staying with the what he's doing, right? But he knows what he has, and he knows how to be competitive, and he knows how to sell the value that he can offer. And amazing, just amazing. And he's in his second weekend, he's happy, he's fulfilled, he got everything that he wanted. And but the way he did that was not, the whole idea is if you're doing the same thing over and over again and you want a different result or expecting a different result, that's called insanity, right? And so he didn't do the same thing over and over again. He notched it up. And he didn't do the same thing that everybody else is doing. He notched it up. He raised his game. And so he is now gainfully employed at Netflix, and he is doing so amazingly well. Now, kid number two decided to take a different strategy. Now, this is really important, folks, okay? Because these are two almost polarized strategies. Now, kid number two is a CPA, okay? And he works for a really good company as their CPA. Now, instead of focusing on that one company, he has decided while he's working to start his own business. And he has his own accounting business because he doesn't want to have to depend on just one company for his livelihood. So in the meantime, he's built this accounting company, and he's got 25 customers, and he's hired another person all while he's working full time. And his full-time company is delighted with him because he's doing the work, he's getting the production done, he's putting in his time. And at the same time, he's looking at the world and he's going, this world is changing. It's changing underneath me. I need to mitigate my risk. I need to take away some of that risk. Now, how am I going to take away the risk of change? Well, I'm going to start my own business. So if I do get laid off by my primary employer, I will have something to fall back on. And the fact of the matter is, there's going to be a point in time, if he keeps going in the direction that he's going, that his primary income is going to be his business. And so he's being very scrappy and he's being very flexible. And he also understands that what he's doing today, and so does my other son, what they're both doing today, they understand may not apply in the future. But guess what they're learning? They're learning skills. They're learning value. They're learning how to be relevant. They're learning how to be scrappy in moving forward. And so my advice that I tell everybody is don't get stuck on what you've been doing in the past. Kind of, take everything that you have. You are an incredibly valuable person. Okay? I mean, every one of us has about this much space, between the headphones. And it's that space between these headphones that makes you so unique, so amazing, and you can make yourself even more amazing. And so the muscle of scrappiness, the muscle of flexibility, the muscle of learning, those three things, scrappiness, flexibility, and learning, are going to carry you through whatever eventuality happens. And when you build those muscles, you're going to land on your feet. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what your circumstances are. When you employ you, okay, anything's possible. Now, so we talked about finding work and maintain your relevance. There's a part two to this that I want to share with you. And yes, this is advice that I've given my kids. As you make money, learn to be scrappy with how you keep your money. Learn to be scrappy with keeping what you make. Here's a question for you. What's more valuable, a dollar earned or a dollar saved? I'll repeat that question. What's more valuable, a dollar earned or a dollar saved? The answer is a dollar saved because with the exception of 401ks, right? A dollar saved is post-tax. So you don't have to pay taxes anymore. And so when you think about this, and I've said this 1,000 times, and I'm going to say this 1,000 times over again, wealth is not about how much you make. Wealth is about how much you keep. Okay, let me repeat that. Wealth is not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. I know, I know lots and lots of people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year who are flat broke. They should be millionaires. They're flat broke. Why? Because if they make $400,000 a year and they spend $400,000 a year, they're flat broke. Worse, if they make $400,000 a year and they spend $400,001 a year or more, they are in debt. And it's just crazy. And you see this all the time. You see people who are making lots and lots of money complaining about how little money they have and how they don't know how they're going to survive the next month. And you go, how does that work? And here's the thing, with the level of insecurity we're going into, the more insecure the world is, the more financial common sense is required. Now, I'm here to tell you that as I look at the world out there, there are relatively few people who have financial common sense. And if you think to yourself, and here's just something for you to think about. If you maintain a balance on your credit card, you do not have financial common sense. You don't. You should not. You are paying upwards of 30% interest on your credit card. That's crazy. And the average credit card balance is over $6,000 a year or $6,000. If you take 30% times $6,000, that's $1,800 a year in interest you're paying. What would your life look like if instead of paying the bank $1,800, you pay off your credit card and you pay yourself $1,800 and you put it away? You invest it. I don't care where you invest it in. Smart money invests in the S&P 500. It just happens that way, right? Now, um, and by the way, that's a stock index, which over the history of the stock index has maintained over 8% a year in return on investment. Now, as I said, financial common sense, and there's lots and lots of books to read out there, right? I've got a bunch of my own books that I look at, but learning about money. You know what your number one, you know what your biggest expense of your entire life is? It's taxes. It's taxes. So one really great thing would be to learn a little bit about taxes. Both of my kids have real estate holdings aside from their principal homes because they've made real estate investments to minimize their taxes. So learning about money is a really important thing because our whole lives depend. The the quality of our life is directly dependent to a certain extent on money. If you have money, you have flexibility. If you have money, you have options. If you have enough money, you have financial freedom. You are free. You don't have to be bonded or shackled to a job, right? Or anything. So, you know, and if you look at it, and if you're at the end of every month, you go, "Oh my gosh, we've we don't have enough money at the end of the month." You might want to think about changing that, especially if you're doing that month in and month out. Now, here's the thing. Finances are like an elephant. They're like eating an elephant. And that old saying of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay. Now I want to, and here's the truth. Here's an absolute truth. You're going to say you might say I'm full of it, but this is the truth. Whatever you're making today, no matter how much or no matter how little, you can save and invest some part of that. You can. And so if you think about that, you think about your circumstances and you go, "Oh my gosh, John, no, you don't understand. I can't afford to save anything. I can barely survive." Okay, so let me tell you about a friend of mine. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm going to call my friend Stevie. Okay. One day, and this was back in when I was with IBM. One day I was having a conversation with Stevie. And I said, "Hey, do you have a 401k?" And a 401k is your own personal retirement program. "Do you have a 401k and are you investing in IBM stock purchase program?" Because back then, as an IBM employee, you could buy IBM stock at 90%, at a 10% discount and turn around and sell it and make 10% immediately, right? Or hold on to it. And so she says to me, she says, "John, no, no, I'm not invested in anything." She says, "I can't afford anything. I every month I end up with no money. And, I feel like I'm really struggling." And so I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah." I said, "Stevie," and I knew the answer to this. I said, "How many Diet Cokes do you drink a day?" And she looked at me and she told me. She basically drank upwards of a six-pack of Diet Coke every day. And she bought the Diet Cokes out of vending machines. And so I asked her how much she spends on her Diet Cokes. Again, I knew the answer, and she told me. And I said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop drinking Diet Cokes." And she says, "What?" I said, "You're only going to do one thing, and that is you're going to stop drinking Diet Cokes." And she says, "I can't do that." I said, "Yes, you can. And I'm going to help you." And she says, "And then what?" I said, "Then you're going to take that money every month that you spent on your Diet Cokes and you're going to invest it in your 401k and invest it in IBM stock." And it wasn't that much money, but she did, right? And boy, it took her almost a month to get out of the out of the withdrawals of getting off of Diet Coke, but she did it. And so one day, so then I left Los Angeles, which is where this was, and I went to Hawaii. And then we moved to Seattle. And so maybe 10 years later, I get a call and it's Stevie. And she says, John, she says, I hear you're living in Seattle now. And I said, yeah. She says, I'm moving to Gig Harbor, which is just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful harbor area just south of Seattle. And I said, really? She says, yeah, yeah. We're moving up to Seattle. And I knew she had two kids and I knew that what her husband did. And I said, so what are you doing? She said, we just bought a house. I said, well, describe your house for me. And she described the house and she says, and we've got a harbor view and everything. And I'm like, wow, you guys must be doing really, really well to be able to afford a house like that. And she says, well, John, that's not it. I said, what do you mean that's not it? She says, the reason why we can buy this house is because of the Diet Cokes. I said, what? She says, John, she says, I stopped drinking my Diet Cokes and I just let it continue to roll year after year. And then we wanted to buy a house in LA. And she says, and we took the money out of the stock in the 401k, took a loan against the 401k, and we put down a down payment on a house in LA. I said, great. And she says, and you know the real estate market in LA at that time? And I said, yes. She says, we made so much money that we then took that money and put a down payment on our house in Gig Harbor that we're moving into. I said, are you kidding me? And she says, yep, all because of the Diet Cokes. Thank you very much, John. And I just laughed and I said, you have got to be kidding me. She goes, nope, nope, everything worked out. And you know what? The amazing thing she said was that it just happened. The money just kept accumulating. And next thing we know, we had enough money to put a down payment on a house. And then it parlayed into and on and on and on. Diet Cokes. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. What's your fix? What's your Diet Coke? Is it Starbucks? Is it beer? Is it buying lunch every day? Right? Is it pot? Somehow, some way, I would submit to you that you could save $5 a day. $5 a day. You know what $5 a day is over the course of 1 year? It's $1,825. Okay. Now, if you think of your life right now, what could you do with 1,825 bucks? Lots of things, right? But here's what you're going to do. You're going to invest it and keep it, and you're going to keep building and saving $5 a day. You're going to see the value of that $5 a day, and you're going to increase it to $10 a day, then $20 a day. Okay? That's how you build wealth. Now, the amazing thing is, and here's another truth, most of us spend more money than we should to impress others, to impress our friends. We buy the cars we do, we buy the clothes we buy the purses we buy, we go out to the restaurants we go to, a lot of times to impress others, right? So if you get your ego out of the equation, and again, this is advice I've given my kids, you are going to be so much more well off. It's crazy. And so, and the last story I'll share with you has to do with a book. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. And this book was written back in the 70s, but the principles still hold true today. And what this book said was that 80% of the people out there that look like millionaires, who are driving nice cars, wearing nice shoes, custom suits and everything, 80% of those people who look like millionaires are flat broke. Okay? 20% might be well off. And so every time I look out and I see a BMW driving by or a luxury car driving by, more often than not, those people are dead broke. And I have found that to be true. Now, on the other hand, 80% of the people who are legitimate, genuine millionaires, you couldn't pick off the street if your life depended on it. They buy used cars, they buy suits off the rack. They're very, very frugal because they understand the time value of money. They understand compounding, which means over 30 years, that $1,800 repeated every year, 1,800, 1,800, 1,800, ends up becoming over 30 years. If you use 8% on the S&P 500, a boatload of money, a boatload of money, far hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, if you think about that, if I look at you and I see you wearing custom suits and driving a, uh, a luxury car, 8 times out of 10, I'll be right that you're dead broke. So, what I tell my kids, and I suggest to you, forget looking like a millionaire. Forget looking like $1 million because it's costing you $1 million. Okay? Therein lies that truth. All right. So, all this said, the part one was about building your relevance and your value, being scrappy, being flexible, right? And being educated. Make sure, build those muscles, right? And my father-in-law once told me something that stuck with me. It stuck with me for 30 years. He said, "People like what they do well. So whatever you're doing, learn to like it." Okay? Let me repeat that. People like what they do well. So whatever you're doing, learn to like it. All right. So today's strategy to survive is to be scrappy. Learn to be scrappy in making your money, in your job, in your career. More importantly, learn to be scrappy in keeping what you make. Okay? That's how you build wealth. That's how you build freedom. That's how you build options. And one last thought is that the more you keep, the more peace you're going to have. How much is peace worth to you? Okay. And I'm talking about financial peace, obviously. But at the same time, the more you keep, the more personal peace you have, the more personal, gosh, accomplishment you can give yourself, right? And so with that, I hope I didn't mean to lecture. I gave this talk to you um, with the whole idea that I'm sharing what I've shared with the people I love the most. And I'm sharing with you what I did myself. And so hopefully maybe one or two ideas will stick. Um, but uh, but that's it. That's it. And of course, there's lots more to do, a lot more involved. But if you start with this, if you just take notes on this and listen to and implement, one great way to start, one great way to start, figure out that Diet Coke. Okay. That's what in terms of keeping your money. One great way to start in terms of scrappiness is to open your eyes. Open your eyes. Your eyes might be focused on what's available out there, or your eyes may be focused on I'm a CPA, or I'm a programmer, or I'm a teacher. Okay? Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Open your horizons. And just understand there's a big, big world out there. I just talked about teachers. Do you think technology is going to revolutionize the way we teach kids? right? So, with that, I hope I gave you an idea or two. I love you. God bless you. Please share this. Please subscribe. We're going to talk about all sorts of kinds of things. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful place to be because nobody here wants anything from you. We just want to share. And through you, maybe make the world a little bit better than the day we landed on it. So, with that, thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time. Bye.